Hello, everybody. Welcome to our weekly Torah class. We always like to start off with giving because how we give, that's how Hashem will give to us. So please give generously so Hashem will give you generously. Let's see. Sorry, that was the phone. It fell. Give me one moment. So I'm going to put some coins in the tzedakah box. We always like to start off with a bang. I'm going to put some coins in the tzedakah box, and we are also dedicating this class in merit of the complete refuah shalema for Chana Leah Sarah Bat Pesha Gidel, Rafal Chaim Meir Ben Sima Kasha, Devor Leah Bas Yafa Liba, Chaim Nessa Levi Ben Shoshana, Razel Bas Hadas, Chana Bela Bas Devorah, and all Klal Yisrael. And we're dedicating this also for Yosef Yitzchak Ben Bela. And I do this class weekly in memory of my dear grandmother, Rivka Dina Bas Yosef Yehuda. I hope you're proud. Today we're going to be introducing the mitzvah of MEZUZAH. It's one of the 10 mitzvahim, and I'm going to share a few words about the mitzvah, and then we're going to introduce you our amazing guest speakers, and we're going to be hearing beautiful stories about the protection of the MEZUZAH. So the mitzvahim protection for the Jewish people. So the 10 mitzvahim is really for the Jewish protection of the Jewish people. And in the year of 1974, there was a sikha, which is volume Yud Gimel, page 211. So I'm going to quote it. It was in Hebrew, but I have it translated in English. Thank you to Mrs. Sarah Lieberman for sharing her words of wisdom. I mean, the Rebbe's words, but she translated for me. We have to attempt with all our strength we have to attempt with all our strength all the mitzvahim that has a special segula. Okay. So the 10 mitzvahim is really a segula, which is a merit regarding our protection and defense of the Jewish people. Also in connection with the mitzvah, a house full of Jewish books, an attempt that a Jewish home, there should be holy Jewish books. And it increases protection of the home and the people living in the home. So all these mitzvahs that we're doing is a skula for us to have protection. Now, just like we gave tzedakah in the beginning of the class, the Lubavitcher Rebbe was very into giving tzedakah, starting the day with tzedakah at any moment, a coin in tzedakah, because it is a form of protection. So next time before you leave your home, don't forget to put tzedakah in. And don't forget to kiss the mezuzah, because we're protecting our home, and it's literally like a security system already, like it's there. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce to you our first guest speaker who we had before, Mrs. Sarah Korn. She's a shlucha in Manhattan, Chabad, the Chabad House Bowery. If you can please unmute yourself and share with us your story about MEZUZAH.
Hi, Chaya. Thank you so much for having me. So just to clarify, you wanted me to talk a little bit about the MEZUZAH campaign first before I told my story, right? Okay, good. So I first of all, just want to say how amazing it is what you're doing here, because you always have the best speakers. Like I'm so inspired even to just be a part of this beautiful panel of all these amazing women. And I also wanted to share with you, I teach a class every Wednesday night in my Chabad house when my students are around. Right now it's the summer, so I have time to think, and what am I going to teach next semester? And literally came to me 10 minutes ago, I'm going to take Chaya's classes, I'm going to watch them all, I'm going to write down the stories, and I'm going to use it to teach my class next semester. So it's amazing to see how your efforts don't only reach the women who watch your classes, but also now the women that I'm going to teach and other people are going to teach. So it's really amazing how you see one effort can have so like waves that you might not even realize. So thank you for all your insight.
We're humbled to have you here with us today.
So I'm going to put my phone down. I hope that you can see me okay. It's a little easier for me to talk because I'm not holding it. Okay, so the MEZUZAH campaign. So we all know, and you've already introduced and had a few speakers on this topic already, that the Rebbe came out with these mitzvahs, these campaigns to get the Jewish people to encourage an increase in these specific 10 mitzvahs. So today we're talking about MEZUZAH. So right after the MEZUZAH campaign came out and the Rebbe was really encouraging the Jewish people to check your mezuzahs, make sure your mezuzahs are kosher. If you don't have a mezuzah, get a kosher mezuzah, and to really promote this mitzvah. And there was a horrible tragedy that happened in Eretz Yisrael. I'm not going to go into, the details of it, but there were a few terrorist attacks, and there was actually a takeover of an elementary school. And after, unfortunately, quite a few tragedies, it actually came out that the people that had been harmed in this terrorist attack and lost their life corresponded to the amount of not kosher mezuzahs that existed in the school and in the home. And so after this happened, the Rebbe said, I know it's interesting in the language the Rebbe used. The Rebbe said, I kept getting a push that I should do this MEZUZAH campaign. And I don't know who was pushing the Rebbe, if it was the Frierdiker Rebbe, if it was Hashem, but it was interesting the way the Rebbe said. Okay. So an interesting thing happened because a few people interpreted what the Rebbe said, that after this tragedy happened and the Rebbe had connected it with the need to promote mezuzahs, a couple of people asked the Rebbe if he was implying that, God forbid, some of these people who had these tragedies, it was like a punishment or something for them not having kosher mezuzahs. And the way the story was told, it was as if the Rebbe was deeply hurt by that question. And to me, it was the most moving thing because the Rebbe's entire being is all about Ahavas Yisrael. Everything that he does and says is out of his love for the Jewish people, his intense, great love for the Jewish people. And he never, ever said anything about the Jewish people that would shine them in a negative light. It was always the opposite. And so the Rebbe clarified that he was chas v'shalom, not in any way saying that, God forbid, if someone doesn't have a kosher mezuzah, they're going to get hurt or because Hashem is going to punish them. That is not what he meant. And he clarified that what he meant, and he used the analogy of a soldier. And the Rebbe said, if a soldier goes out to war without a helmet or without a bulletproof vest, so, it would be very irresponsible because it provides him with protection, right? So the Rebbe said there's no one to blame for these horrific acts that happen to these people other than the terrorists themselves, that they did an act of evil. But mezuzahs provide the Jewish people with protection from the evil that's in the world. And that's actually can you hear me okay? Am I breaking? Yeah. So one of the main functions of a mezuzah is that it protects us from evil. So then you might ask a question, why evil in the first place? But that's the whole point, is that Hashem sent the Jewish people down to this world where there is evil, there is klipa, there is tzra'ach, and it has an ultimate purpose that we will understand fully when we have the Gula Shlema, which the Rebbe said is happening any second now, may it be immediately. We'll understand why we had to grapple with darkness and go through all of these struggles in order to come to this great light of Mashiach. But until then, we need protection. Now, why we'll do mitzvahs once Mashiach is fully here? Yes, we're still going to have mitzvahs and it'll accomplish something else. But right now, at this time, it's a mitzvah from Hashem to have a mezuzah. Obviously, we do it because Hashem commanded us to, but it also provides us with protection from the evil that's in the world. And so the Rebbe, after this terrorist attack happened, the Rebbe clarified, I'm just so happy that we're doing this. And now I understand why, because the Jewish people obviously need more protection. And that's why they should be putting up these mezuzahs. So now, one more thing the Rebbe said that I find very interesting, and then we'll go into my story, is the Rebbe then said at the end, and don't think that the women shouldn't think that this is just the men, right? Because you might think, because it was, by the way, when we get our mezuzahs checked every year in Elul, it's a custom to get the mezuzahs checked to show Hashem that we're beautifying the mitzvahs. And so and at the same time, when we get the mezuzahs checked, we also get the tefillin checked. So you kind of might categorize it in your mind as it's the man's job, right? He'll do it. He'll get his tefillin checked. He'll get the mezuzahs checked. And the Rebbe said, don't just leave it up to the men. The women should also make sure it happens. So that kind of leads me into the story that I want to tell about the power of a woman's intuition. But before I say that, I also do want to clarify. So, a lot of people, I don't know, some of the people who are watching this, maybe they know for sure they bought kosher mezuzahs, but you may be watching this and think you have a mezuzah on your door. And okay, so you're doing the mitzvah. So it's very important to make sure if you have a mezuzah on your door that you get it opens up by a sofer and check to make sure that there's actually a kosher scroll inside. Because a lot of people, well-meaning, they'll go to Israel, they'll go somewhere and they'll find a beautiful mezuzah case and they think, well, I'm a Jew, I'm gonna buy a mezuzah. And they don't realize that what's inside is either nothing or just a plain piece of paper. And for a mezuzah to be kosher, it has to actually have a parchment, a specific parchment made out of animal skin, and it has to be written in a very specific way by someone who knows how to write mezuzahs properly. Another thing that can happen is you could know that you bought a kosher mezuzah, but maybe you haven't had it checked in a while. So we try to do it every year in Elo. And because sometimes you'll buy a perfectly kosher mezuzah, and then a year later, you'll find that it's not kosher anymore because a letter is missing something. Sometimes it happens that the sofer made a mistake when he originally wrote it. Sometimes there's weather or different issues that come and it gets weared away at, and it actually was kosher and now it's not. And I like to add that I think sometimes we don't understand why our mezuzahs become not kosher. Sometimes we have a perfectly, beautifully kosher mezuzah inside in our house where there's no weather, there's no dripping air conditioner, there's no issues. Last year it was perfectly kosher, and for some reason this year it's missing a letter. How does that happen? Well, I think that it also just shows us that this life is more than meets the eye. Hashem is recreating the world every moment. A mezuzah is a holy entity. It's not just some words written on a parchment. It's literally a spiritual entity protecting us from the darkness in the world. And sometimes it gets a defect. How does it get there? We don't know how everything happens in this world. That's why it's really important to check them. So on that note, I'll tell you a short story. I told Chaya the story and she said I should tell the whole story. I'll try not to make it too long. But basically, my husband and I have been on shlichus in Manhattan for, over 20 years. And, Brooklyn is one thing. Brooklyn's city, like people like to get out of Brooklyn in the summer. Manhattan is like, if Brooklyn is city, Manhattan is like city on, lots of caffeine. It's like very, very crowded, polluted, stuffy place. And our Chabad house is only functioning when students are around. We're a student Chabad house. So in the summers, we would have some guests for Shabbos. There was things going on. We would plan our next semester, but we didn't really need to be in the city. And my husband always had this dream that we would get a house outside of the city that we can also use to have people from our Chabad house. Like sometimes we'll get really close to the student, they'll get married, they'll have kids, and then we can't really get together with them because we don't have a place for them to stay with us on Shabbos in Manhattan. Manhattan's like, you're lucky if you get an apartment big enough for your family. So my husband always wanted to get a place where we could host guests in the summer and we could have retreats for our Chabad house. Anyway, so in around 2018, so I guess it was like Ayin Ches was the Hebrew year, my father-in-law told us he wanted to help us buy a house in Manhattan for, that we should own a home for our family. But my father-in-law, as generous as he is, he's a wonderful, generous man, and he had a decent amount of money for us. It was enough for us to buy about a studio apartment in Manhattan, which is not going to get a family our size very far. So my husband convinced him, you know what, Dad, I've always had this dream that I want to have a retreat for our Chabad house out of the city, and the amount of money you have to give us is what we would need to get something. And my husband had actually done a wedding on a property about like 15 years before this. And it was about an hour out of the city in Connecticut. And he fell in love with this property. He always talked about it. He always said, I want to get something like that place, okay? Anyway, one day my husband's sitting by the fire in the morning and he's looking through a paper that usually does not have listings for real estate. There was a whole story about how the owner of the house got a favor with someone in this paper. And he sees this house, the house he did the wedding on, the one he always talked about and said he wanted to get a place just like it. And it was the exact amount of money that my father-in-law had to give us. So he had to do a little convincing to my father-in-law that I said, my husband's father, he brought him to the place, he saw it, and he was like, that's it, I'm getting this for you. And to this day, he always says it's like one of the best things he ever did. Baruch Hashem. Anyway, so one of the beautiful things about getting a house that's in farmland in Connecticut outside of the city is that there's lots of barns and there's, a guest house, thank God. And we literally, the first year that we got this place, we kept finding new doors that needed mezuzahs. And I told my father-in-law, it was a little chutzpahdik, but I basically said to him, if you're going to buy us a house, please don't leave us needing to figure out how we're going to furnish it. Just give us a budget also that we could buy furniture. He was fine. I told my husband, I'm we can't have an empty house. It's got to So we gave us a budget and we ended up using a nice portion of it for the mezuzahs because I was like, we're going to get really good high level altar of mezuzahs for the house. I really want to like do this right. And okay, so anyway, so all the mezuzahs, we had to like carve out places inside some of the barns to put the mezuzahs in. There wasn't even proper places for every place that actually halachically needed a mezuzah. Anyway, so the first summer that we were here, we had owned the place for about 6 months and Elul came, but we had just, gotten all our new kosher mezuzahs 6 months before, and there were many of them, like over 40. So we were like, okay, we're not checking the mezuzahs this Elul, we just got them. By the time the next summer came around, it had already been a year and a half. And I was like, okay, we need to check the mezuzahs at the beginning of the summer. And my husband was like, no, we'll wait till Elul. Now, Baruch Hashem, my husband is wonderful. He's a God-fearing man. We're like on the same page about, Torah and mitzvahs. We don't like, thank God. But he always tries to keep me calm. I'm very spiritual and I'm always like, we got to get the mezuzahs checked. And he like tries to keep my like spiritual anxiety. It's always like sort of interesting. Like, am I being anxious or am I being intuitive? Like we have to always find our balance. So we're balancing each other out. He's like, we're gonna be normal. We're gonna wait until Elul. It's gonna be fine. I'm like, okay. I felt a little uneasy about it, but I was like, fine. So my husband, every year, him and his best friend, their birthdays are in Sivan, like right before the summer vacation starts for my kids. So they since we've gotten this place, they have like a big get together with all their friends for Shabbos. They come, they bring the Sefer Torah, they have a minyan, and they bring all Shabbos. It's like a guy's Shabbos. And so they were here for the Shabbos before my family came. And one of his friends was like, a couple of his friends were staying in the guest house. And one of them, their foot went through the deck of the guest house and he got hurt. Now, thank God he didn't have to go to the hospital, not that kind of hurt, but he got hurt. Like he was limping around all shot. So after this happened, I said to my husband, maybe we should just get the mezuzahs checked. And he was like, no, it's going to be fine. And it's so funny because I knew I was going to tell this story even before I read about what the Rebbe said. And when I saw the Rebbe said, like, listen to the women, like they should get involved, like let the women be involved in this mitzvah. I was like, oh my gosh, this is exactly what the Rebbe was talking about. So I was like, I really think we should get the mezuzahs checked. And he was like, no, there's going to be people staying in the guest house all summer. I want to have mezuzahs on the doors because if we take them off and send them to New York, it's going to take time. And let's just wait till Elul. The next Shabbos, another family was staying in the guest house and another person's foot went through the deck. Like the deck obviously needed to be fixed. There was some like rotting wood and we had to fix it, but we've had that since then and no feet have gone through it, okay? So this other person got also like a little hurt, nothing great, nothing terrible. Still, no, we're gonna wait till Elul. So I'm like, I'm starting to get like really like, I think we really need to check these mezuzahs. And then what happened was the pool in the house that's connected to the guest house, like the pool on the property is connected to the guest house. It went completely murky. Like the pool was like soupy. And the pool guy who kept coming at like, I was like, okay, you got to come back. You have to do your chemical filtration, whatever it is that you do to make a pool nice. Like you're not doing a good job. My pool is soupy. And my kids wouldn't even go in it because it was just like so murky. And the pool guy was like, I don't know what to do. Never, ever in all my years have I had such a stubborn situation like this. I cannot get your pool to get clean. It's so stubborn. I don't know what's wrong with it. So I've got a murky pool, decks that people are putting their foot through. And then the mezuzah on the front door of the guest house fell off. And I was like, that's it. Like up until that moment, I was like being respectful. My husband and I, we balance each other out. I make suggestions. I was like, we're getting the mezuzahs checked. And he was still like, I'm not sure if it's necessary. We could wait till Elul, but fine. He was like a little bit ambivalent about it. I did it myself. I was like, that's it. I got a hammer. I took all the mezuzahs down off of the guest house. I was like, we'll do the main house after. I'm just going to do the guest house for now. And I sent them with my mother's helper to Crown Heights. We're getting them checked. Anyway, the sofer who sold us the mezuzahs, he knew, like I just bought them a year and a half ago. And the one that was on the front door of the guest house was in a waterproof mezuzah case. It was an outdoor mezuzah. He calls me because my mother's helper wants to pick it up. And he was in shock, because not only was there one letter missing, or it was like the entire front door of my Althaus was puzzle. Like somehow water had gotten into it and waterlogged the entire thing. I had to replace the whole MEZUZAH. You couldn't even fix it. You know, sometimes they fix a little thing here. And he was shocked. Like he was just like, this doesn't really happen. Like, I don't know how water got in. It's a waterproof case, but it's totally possible. You have to replace the entire MEZUZAH. I was so excited to call my husband. I was like, I told you, you have to listen to me. Hashem told Abraham, listen to Sarah. Anyway, so we got all the MEZUZAHs on the property checked. Early in the summer, we did not wait until Elul. Eventually, my pool was fine. We fixed the wood on the deck. No one got hurt. And since then, every year we have to get the wood replaced on the deck. There's like little parts that get a little rotted and we replace them with new wooden planks. Nobody's ever put their foot through since. Anyway, so that's my story. Thank you so much for having me here. I hope it encourages and inspires everyone to get MEZUZAHs, check your MEZUZAHs, and Hashem should protect you all. And we should only know of good and going from good to good from here on, and we should have the foolish Laine immediately.
Thank you so much, Sarah. I'm sure you inspired many today with your story. I know you did, inspired me. And we are now going to introduce you our next speaker. I just want to give credit where credit's due to Chaya, my friend, who told me that I have to call her friend who has an amazing story about MEZUZAHs. So I'm going to ask Sterna Cassowitz, the shlucha in St. Paul, Minnesota, to please unmute yourself and share with us today.
So, Chaya, thank you very much for all the inspiration throughout the weeks. It's just been terrific. I just want to say how you always say, thank you, Rebbe. Thank you, Rebbe, for the empowerment and for putting women and girls on such a plateau. I can remember when I was younger, there were days in the calendar year when the women and girls would be in the men's shul, and the Rebbe used to speak to them directly. And the Rebbe made things very clear that you, women and girls, have the power to influence. To the girls, he said, your siblings. To the women, he said, your families and your whole environment around you. And you have the power. And I'll never forget that. It always just gave me such a sense of confidence then. And it is really a confidence that stays without, and there's no room for doubt. It gives us just such an uplift, and the Rebbe elevated us to such a point that we feel the confidence, and we just have to do what the Rebbe has given us, the moral compass, the directives, and if we follow that, we will be in great shape. So not only actually by doing or saying, many times the Rebbe would say, by being a dugma chaya, by being an example, that alone, what a Torah girl or woman should be, it is already impactful on others. And so I wanted to bring that up because that's something that left an impression on me when I was a young girl. And I used to go, whether it was at the end of the summer, graduates of school, or Vav Tishrei in honor of the Rebbe's mother, the women would go in, or conventions as well. Those were the few times in the year when we would go into the menstrual, and the Rebbe spoke directly to us, but encouraging. And I want to just bring up one more thing, and that is in a sikha that the Rebbe taught, that Batya, the daughter of Paro, when she saw the baby crying and she realized it's a Jewish child, she reached out her hand, and physically she was not able to reach the basket where Moshe was in, where Moses was in that basket, that famous story, but she tried to push herself to the utmost. And then Hashem helped her go past her limits, and she was able to, her hands stretched out further so that she was able to bring in the basket and save this baby Moshe, who was the leader then of the Jewish people. And the sikha which the Rebbe points out, is that we just have to try, push ourselves. We can do so much more than we think we can do. And so we push ourselves, and then Hashem helps us to be successful on what we set out to do. So this is more about MEZUZAH, and Sarah brought up something about MEZUZAH, and the place was called Malot up in northern Tzfat. I remember that when the story of Entebbe, and I think it happened in the summer, and I think the movie is called Thunderbolt. I do not watch movies, but that was one that I saw because it was all about Entebbe. And when that came out, and it was absolutely horrific. And I'm not going to discuss about the whole thing. You could look it up. But the Rebbe started talking about MEZUZAH then. I don't know if it was Malot or Entebbe. And there actually was a frum couple involved, a couple from Borough Park. And they had couldn't understand why the Rebbe is talking so much about MEZUZAH. And like Sarah said before, she said the Rebbe had this feeling to talk about it, but yet they were from, and they felt that, what is the Rebbe talking about? We have MEZUZAHs and great MEZUZAHs on all the doors, and we check, and it should be checked twice in 7 years. And so there were actually some Lubavitcher Bachrim that came to their house to check out their house and knock on every single door. It's not just about a kosher MEZUZAH, it's about the placement as well. And they went around checking every door, and everything was perfect. When they were saying goodbye, they stopped on the porch or the deck. There was a place where it had whatever it is, the entrance way, whatever, a pillar that needed a MEZUZAH, and there was no MEZUZAH there. And actually, I mean, I get the chills when I say it, because they pointed it out to this couple, and I think this couple went by the Rebbe to kind of ask Mechila, to ask for a bracha, because they kind of were second judging. I don't know if they were like, how was the Rebbe talking about MEZUZAH when everything they have was kosher, v'yasher, perfect? But you know, that piece, that forgotten pillar in the entrance of the door did not have a MEZUZAH. And so they did go to the Rebbe and acknowledged. So that was when I remember in full force that it began. I don't know if Malot came after or before, but that's where I thought the Mitzvah started, and it was a very big impression at the time. So now I do have a few personal, more updated stories. And I will say that a lot of times when issues happen, we become so overwhelmed with the issues at hand that we actually cannot even begin to think about MEZUZAH, let alone try to convince somebody else about MEZUZAH that they should have their MEZUZAHs checked. It actually doesn't even make sense to them. They're dealing with a specific problem, a health problem. What are we talking about MEZUZAHs? Well, the Rebbe explained that if there is a lack in a spiritual sense, it manifests itself in a physical sense. And we try to explain it. Many times we will, people will say to us, we got a beautiful MEZUZAH from our friends they brought it back from Israel. And there's a misunderstanding that it's not the MEZUZAH cover. You open it up and there's no MEZUZAH inside. They call the MEZUZAH cover MEZUZAH. That's number one. Number two, there is a lot of fraud in MEZUZAHs where it could be just paper. There is so much. A MEZUZAH signifies that this home is blessed. It is actually inscribed with the same kind of script as the Torah. And it is really a holy document that is placed in the MEZUZAH. What is on this mezuzah? This mezuzah has two passages from the Shema, from the Torah. It is in Deuteronomy chapter 6 and in chapter 11. And it has the first paragraph of Shema, and then it has Vehaya. And that is what is in the mezuzah. And in the mezuzah, it is customary, with the mezuzah, it is customary, once it's affixed, upon entering and leaving the house, we touch the mezuzah, we kiss the mezuzah, and it's also a Jewish declaration of faith in Hashem, that we believe in Hashem, we love Hashem, we serve Hashem, and we are obligated to do the mitzvahs that Hashem asked us to do. And when we kiss the mezuzah, when we leave the home, we should just know that Hashem protects us in the home and also outside the home. That it's not like a king who sits in his palace and needs the guards to guard around the palace to protect the king. Hashem says, I will sit outside, you stay in the home, and I will protect you. And the fact is that the mezuzahs need to be written in a very special, specific way. There are actually 22 lines, 732 letters, 4,649 laws in writing a mezuzah. It cannot be written by just any ordinary person. It has to be really a competent scribe. And every letter and every part of this mezuzah needs to be perfect. And that is the way it's be called kosher. Kosher means proper. It is properly sanctifies and protects our home. And then we have the issue of checking the mezuzahs and checking the mezuzahs by a reputable scribe. And you need to ask your local Chabad rabbi to help you find someone who is a reputable scribe, because due to weather, due to the elements, letters can be faded, letters can be connected, and every single room in the house, not only the rooms, doorways, and walk-in closets that can be like a room, all need mezuzahs. And nowadays, I do want to say that the scribes with technology, and we use technology for Torah and for mitzvahs, the technology can help us by FaceTiming with a reputable scribe, and they will show you how exactly to affix the mezuzah, if it's the right height. It's not just checking the mezuzah, it's got to be the right height. It's got to be the right position. It's got to be slanted, and the top has to be facing in. Where is the right side of the door? Where is the left side? And so all this, they FaceTime with you, and you can put it on. So it's not just kosher mezuzahs, the location, the placement, all are important as well. And why I'm so passionate about it is because I learned by mistakes. I learned by faulty mezuzahs, but unfortunately, it didn't happen just by checking. It wasn't proactive. It happened because situations were not good, whether it was health, whether it was parnasa, stories that I know, parnasa, and also shalom bayis. All of these, if you listen to the directive of the Rebbe, usually the Rebbe would say, check mezuzahs and tefillin off the bat. That was the first thing. And if we follow the Rebbe's directives, we'll be safe. So what's out of the ordinary also, I do want to suggest, I did want to say that sometimes what the Rebbe would suggest to put a mezuzah in the car to keep the car safe. We have a tzedakah box in the mezuzah, in the glove compartment, and a mezuzah. Now, I have an unusual, just a little tidbit. My mother, Aleha Hashalom, she passed away very young at 52, but she used to have nightmares. She wrote into the Rebbe. The Rebbe told her to put a mezuzah in her night drawer, and the nightmares miraculously dissipated. And I think that it's just really the circumstances, and what is given to an individual as advice doesn't mean that this should be for everyone. But somehow this was a direction for her. She followed, and everything calmed down. So before I get to my bigger stories, I want to just say, when you see the outside of a mezuzah, it does also say Shin Daled Yud, and it said that means Shomer. The Shin stands for Shomer. Dalet, Dalsos, Daltot, the doors, Shomer, guards, Daltot, the doors, Yisrael of Yisrael. Hashem guards the doors, and I want to say this is a cheap investment, and the best insurance policy you will ever have is by having kosher mezuzahs placed in the right places and the right placement as far as where they need to be on the door. And that again, FaceTime. Okay, so for my stories, everybody has their issues, but I say to be proactive is the best advice. Just like Sarah said, I will refer back, the Rebbe said, the halacha is twice in 7 years, but most people do it every year, yearly. And it is the best advice, and it usually depends on the woman kind of nudging so that we get it done. It's just the way we take care of the material in the home. We also are responsible for the spiritual in the home as well. So I'll start off with a story that happened to my husband. We went for Pesach to a daughter, and they're out of town. He went to the mikveh to table some new kalim, and he got a scratch on his arm, and from the door. Came home, he put on a Band-Aid. First day of Chalamayit already, he had these terrible sweats. The whole bed was full. He had to change his clothing. Like, you're talking about not normal sweats, not just you're hot, you're sweating. These were just really overwhelming. You had to change everything. So that was already Chalamayit, first day. Second day, by Mashiach Soda, he looked sickly. And we continued on, came home, and we went to the doctor. We went to the doctor, and the doctor took blood tests. Didn't come back with anything. I have a friend who's a nurse. I discussed it with her. I looked up on Mayo Clinic symptoms to try to figure out what these crazy night sweats were that made, I put towels, you had to change the towels, the sheets, everything. And it was just not normal. And he was losing a lot of weight. And I know we all like to lose weight, but not in that way. So I asked a nurse, a friend of mine, and she said, well, the doctor has to give some kind of plan. You just can't go on like this. And he didn't say anything. And then I told my husband, he demanded that the doctor please give him the next step, what he's supposed to do. If he doesn't see anything in blood tests, regular blood tests, what to do next. So he referred him to epidemiologist. So we went to the epidemiologist, and he took like 17 tests, 17 different types of blood tests. I went shopping for Shabbos. I'm in the store shopping for Shabbos. And my husband went to an osteopath. He was trying to get some relief. He didn't know what to do with himself. I couldn't even believe he drove himself. But anyway, I was shopping for Shabbos. They called me in the store, and they said, we're trying to reach your husband. He's not answering the phone. Your husband was diagnosed with endocrinitis. And I'm like, what's that? And they said it has to do with heart issues, the heart valve, and he must get to the nearest emergency room. I don't even know what I had on my shopping cart. I left. I left. They said, we're trying to reach your husband. Anyway, meanwhile, the doctor did try to reach my husband, and he's on his way back. And the doctor's telling him, you may have, you need to go to the emergency room. It has to do with the heart. And he said, I have to say Kaddish for my father, and I have to be gonna come on Sunday. And he says, Rabbi, I don't want to tell you that you may have a stroke or a heart attack, but you need to go to the nearest emergency room. Anyway, I started to get anxious and I called a Rofe Yedid. I called this doctor and I said, this is what my husband was diagnosed with. Can you please help me get him to the hospital? He wants to wait till after Shabbos. So this doctor did call him and said, where are you? Are you close to home? Because if you're not home, I'm going to order an ambulance. If you're not going, I'm going to order an ambulance to take. And he says, no, I'm 5 minutes away. And he says, is your wife, Sterna, home? Yes, please go to the emergency room. Anyway, we went to the emergency room. They're taking all kinds of tests, all that. They had to strep mutacoccus, I think that's what it's called, entered through the cut, went through his body, and then it entered to the heart because the blood goes back and forth through the valve to the heart. So they had to find, so they found what was the, so now they know what was the infection or the germ. Now they have to find the right antibiotic. So for 5 days, he was in the hospital. I prepared everything to go to the hospital. I was there Shabbos, and Shabbos, the surgeon comes to him and tells him, Rabbi, I'm the surgeon and you're going to have this valve replacement. And my husband really did not believe it was going to come to that. He says, you don't understand. I have a trip. I'm taking a trip of camping and fishing up to the boundary waters. He says, no, Rabbi, you don't understand. You're going to have this. But anyway, so just back up a little bit. I come back from the hospital when they were doing all this tests and they admitted him into a room and they're trying to work on antibiotics, see how the body takes it and all that. And I didn't know what to do. What would the Rebbe say? Check mezuzahs. So I am not technical, but I took a knife, I took a hammer, I took a chisel, whatever I can take. And I removed 27 mezuzahs from the house in 45 minutes with my anxious energy. I had everything with the label, which room it goes to, and all the mezuzahs removed. I was in the post office and I discussed it with my son. He said, you're better off sending it UPS in case it comes there. No one's there to get it. They would have to go downtown, whatever. So it went the next morning. The next morning, I called a sofa. Please, my husband is severely ill. Check his mezuzahs right away. It's an absolute priority. Anyway, how did it come back? How did it come back? Or we spoke to him and he said, first of all, we had excellent mezuzahs, but two words were attached. Letters were attached. Letters were attached. One was completely puzzle, completely. I don't know how, but completely puzzle. One, it's the elements, it's temperature. Another was a problem with the way its location, the way it was positioned was an absolute problem. My husband actually, when we put it back up, a new one, we put he had to shave off like the switch plate of the light because it was not laying properly and it was in between security buttons and electric, what is it called? The switches. So it didn't have the proper space. So he had to shave it down. Anyway, meanwhile, it took him a long time. He had to first get rid of the infection. We had to keep on going to the clinic to make sure that it wasn't affecting other organs. And thank God, when he did have the surgery in July, I remember it's maybe the week of Gimel Tammuz, when I got the beeper said number 18. And I was just so confident. I knew that we took care of the mezuzahs. Right away, I have taken them down. They were checked. They were replaced, what had to be replaced. They were fixed, repaired, what had to be repaired. And then they were placed back and in the proper position. Again, FaceTiming the scribe, making sure that it was proper. He did have to go through the surgery, but they said he was unbelievable because everything was such a rapid recuperation. And I mean, he was in good shape to go in, but he was so weak. These things can weaken you so badly. So that was one story of the mezuzah. I don't know yet the time, how much I have left, but I do want to mention a few others. There was a story with me personally, and I just have many situations where there was a botched up gallbladder surgery. They ended up cutting the bile and cystic duct, and I needed to wear a bag for 8 weeks. I had many issues that happened in between, which was like pulmonary embolism in both lungs. It is so painful. And I started to think, what is going on? This is what I got so weak. I also lost about 40 pounds. I couldn't manage the children, not the activities, nothing. It just everything. And thank God a daughter came to run the home, take care of the children. I was just a case. Every day, every other day, something else would happen. And it was really crisis. And finally I said to my husband, check the mezuzahs. I can't take it anymore. And, also, so many things to be done. He's managing so many things, but yet I said, don't come to me until those mezuzahs are taken to the post office and send them out. Anyway, sure enough, there was one mezuzah that was completely puzzle on our bedroom door. It wasn't a regular. I had really critical situations. And once that mezuzah, yes, Baruch Hashem, I was guided by this doctor friend again to a doctor who corrects other doctors' mistakes, because that was really a mistake that took place. And it took many months of recuperating. The liver is very weakening, and it took many months, but at least, thank God, I never thought I'd be able to see the day. Nurses had to bathe me. And it just, I never thought I'm going to see the day that I have a few more short stories if you have time, but these are very short.
So Shterna, we'd love to hear the stories. Such amazing stories so far. We'd love to hear them. But if you don't mind, we're gonna say it a little bit later on in the program, okay?
Just one point that I want to make. It is not only health issues. I'm not going to mention other stories, but other examples had to do with livelihood as well, and shalom bayis. So please remember, when we get into these situations, we should not wait for those situations. God's trying to get our attention. We should be more proactive in trying to check the mezuzahs and getting them from a reputable scribe. So thank you for allowing me to share.
Thank you so much for sharing, and we hope you'll continue to sharing the stories later on in the program. We have 2 moms that have to get to their children, and we're so honored that they're here. So now I'm going to ask if Razy Mendelson, a shlucha in Jackson, Wyoming, to please unmute yourself and share with us your miracle story about MEZUZAH. Thank you so much.
Hi, thanks. So
I just want to quickly say thank you to Ada Kunin, shlucha in California, for recommending you to speak today.
Oh, thank you, Ada. So I'm going to share with you a story that just took place last year, very connected to MEZUZAHs. So about 2 years ago, I gave birth to our 7th child, a beautiful little boy. Our Dovi was born on his due date and hit all his milestones and was developing beautifully. And when Dovi turned 9 months old, everything changed. He stopped gaining weight. His head circumference stopped growing. His height stopped growing. He stopped developing. So like he was doing the body crawl, but after that, he completely stopped any more development. And then in addition, he started having crazy fevers once, twice a month, like 105, 106, even 107. And each time we ran to the emergency room and they had no answers for us. And this continued on for 9 months till Jovi was 18 months old. And when he was 18 months old, again, on another bout of a crazy fever of 107, we were back in the emergency room. And this time we discovered that he had a UTI, which was great. We finally found some sort of something related to maybe the cause of the fever. Now in boys, it's very unusual to get UTIs. So they sent us to check out his kidneys. And we did scans of his kidneys and we discovered that our Dovi had hydronephrosis, which is liquid in his kidney, as well as an enlarged kidney. Great. I felt like, okay, maybe we're getting to the bottom of things. And our daughter recommended that we live in a tiny, tiny town. No specialists of any sort. Our closest mikvah is 5 hours away. Our closest, from community is 12 hours away or 10 hours away. We're really in the middle of nowhere. And so our doctor recommended that we drive to Salt Lake City, 5 hours away, to see a urologist and do some tests on Dovi's kidneys. I know not a nephrologist. This is the area that, urologist deals with, to see if he would need antibiotics for many years, or if he would need surgery. Now, in the meantime, that week, I gave birth to our 8th child. So not wanting to do the drive with all my homeschooled children and a newborn, I really wanted a second opinion. So I reached out to Shluchim Refuah, which is an organization that helps Shluchim with medical needs and referrals and second opinions. And I reached out to Chani Goldberg from Morristown, who works for Shluchim Refuah. And I told her that I just wanted a second opinion on doing these procedures in Salt Lake City on our Dovi's kidneys. Was that the next right step? And then I casually mentioned that also, he has crazy fever. In addition to his kidneys, he also has crazy fevers. And he's also not developing correctly. He's at 18 months. He doesn't yet crawl. He doesn't yet sit. He doesn't yet walk. He doesn't yet talk. And has terribly low weight gain. He's not on any of the growth charts. So the doctor in Shluchim Refuah looked over all of his notes and medical records and said to me, you could do this, you have to do this thing in Salt Lake City. Yes, this is a great, to check out his kidneys, but I think there's a much larger issue here that you're dealing with. And I really want you to see a geneticist, and we want you to fly into CHOP and to in Philadelphia and to do a full medical exam. And really, and then he said to me, after looking at all of his records, I believe your son has such and such a syndrome. Now, telling, any mother that their child has a syndrome is very difficult. Telling a mother who is on no sleep, postpartum, 1 week after birth, just having set up my whole own bris for my next son, I was a total wreck. And every time I looked at my beautiful Dovi, all I saw was a syndrome, and I was a mess. Anyway, that Motzei Shabbos, I sat down. My house was quiet. I sat down to nurse my newborn, and I took a random book off the shelf. I took the book by the Der Herr called The Rebbe Will Find a Way. And I opened up to a random story in the middle. And the story that I read was about a girl named Rabinovich from Ashkelon, who in middle of Shabbos, her legs just stopped working. She was 2 years old, running around, and all of a sudden her legs stopped working. And the family, they rushed her to the hospital to see, ran a ton of tests. And Motzei Shabbos, Rabbi Rabinovich went home, took all of his mezuzahs off of his doors and sent them, dropped them off, wrote upon to the Rebbe, dropped them off at a cipher to be checked, and then went back to the hospital. So they're in the hospital and they're still just waiting for results. Nothing's coming through. And all of a sudden, this little girl, hours after she's been paralyzed, this little girl says, Ima, I could feel my legs, put me on the floor. And they put her on the floor. And to the astonishment of all the doctors and everyone there, this little girl just starts running. So there's nothing left to do at the hospital. The daughter's legs are working, so they leave the hospital. And on the way home, the father gets a phone call from the cipher that he had dropped off his mezuzahs by. And the cipher said, "You're welcome to pick up your mezuzahs. Everything's great. There was just one issue with one mezuzah. The letter vase in the word uvalechtecha was wiped out, causing there to be two separate words. He said, I fixed the letter vase. Your mezuzahs are good as new." Turns out that the same moment that he fixed the letter vase in the word uvalachtecha was the same moment that his daughter's legs started working in the hospital. So I finished the story and I closed the book, and I knew that I didn't randomly open up to this story. Uvalachtecha means and when you will go. Uvalachtecha b'derech, when you go on your way. So the letter vase in that word of when you go is when her legs started working again. And I used the word sofer, which means a scribe. A scribe is the one that checks our mezuzahs. So I finished the story, and I knew that I didn't randomly open up to the story. I divinely opened up to the story, and I knew that there had to be a message here for me. And so I started to try and rack my brain. What changed in our lives when our Dovi was 9 months old that caused him to stop growing, to stop developing, to start having these crazy fevers, to get, kidney issues? There had to be something in our lives that changed. And I realized that when he was 9 months old, we put up security fences around our property. And we had 4 entrances, 4 gates. And it hit me like a bolt of lightning. I realized, oh my gosh, we never put up mezuzahs on our gates. And it says, al mezuzahis, al mezuzot beitecha uvisha'arecha, on your posts of your door and on your gates. On your gates. And none of my gates had mezuzahs. I right away called up my husband, and I told him my epiphany, and he ordered, the largest, most beautiful, most well-written, expensive mezuzahs, and he put them up on our gates. Now, traditionally, the halacha is that we check our mezuzahs twice within 7 years. So we had already checked our mezuzahs twice within 7 years. So I figured that was enough. Just putting up the mezuzahs on our gates was what was needed. But the following evening, when I was putting my daughter, Dvarlaya, who's 4, to sleep, she asked me that I show her a video of the Rebbe, which typically my husband puts her to sleep at night and shows her a video every night. And so I said, okay. And I opened up to my phone on my WhatsApp, a video from Jem, who I get every day, a 2-minute video that I hadn't opened up this WhatsApp for a few months. And so I just opened it up and I just scrolled down to the last video that came in. And I lied there in her bed and watched the video with her. The video had 3 parts. The first part of the video was a man came to the Rebbe and asked for a bracha, for a blessing, for good health. And the Rebbe said to him, check your tefillin and mezuzahs, and then proceeded to give him a beautiful blessing. The second part of the video was a woman came to the Rebbe and asked the Rebbe for a blessing for health for her sister. And the Rebbe told her, tell your sister she should check her mezuzahs. And the woman responded, oh, Rebbe, my sister, she's a tzadikah. She's very righteous. And the Rebbe smiled and said, well, she's not the one who wrote the mezuzah, so how's that going to help? And then proceeded to give her a beautiful blessing. Then the third part of the video was at a Farbrengen, a huge gathering where the Rebbe spoke to thousands of Chassidim, thousands of his disciples and everyone else in attendance. And the Rebbe said that it's brought down in the Mateh Ephraim, the importance for one to check their mezuzahs every year during the month of Elul. And then the Rebbe says, even if you feel like you already checked your mezuzahs twice within 7 years, you should still do so again during the month of Elul. At this point, we were now 1 week to Rosh Hashanah. I said, okay, Rebbe, I get the message loud and clear. The next morning, I took down our 23 other mezuzahs that we have on our doors, and we right away overnighted them to a sofer. In the meantime, the doctor from this organization, Shluchim Refuah, was kept, bothering me that we should really go for genetic testing. And I really didn't want to. Maybe I was in denial. Maybe it was easier to tracht gut, to think positive. The Rebbe often talks about the importance of thinking positive, and then you'll have a positive outcome. And I just felt like having an official diagnosis would make it hard for me to really think positively. And so I didn't want to, but I was being, encouraged to. And so I sat down and I wrote another letter to the Rebbe to fax in to the Ohel, the Rebbe's resting place. And I wrote a letter asking the Rebbe for clarity. Should I do genetic testing or not? I needed clarity. Anyway, that evening, I was discussing this with my husband about, that they're pushing us. And he said, look, we bought new MEZUZAHs. We sent our MEZUZAHs to be checked. If we're 100% sure that everything's going to be okay, then who cares? We'll go for genetic testing and we'll just rule everything out. So I felt like, okay, he has clarity. I wasn't sure, but he was. So I got in touch with my pediatrician and I asked my pediatrician to send over a referral to the genetics department in Salt Lake City for us to do genetic testing. My doctor was very happy to send over a referral. And she told me she sent in a referral and I should just wait a few days and I'll get a call from the genetics department. The following week, we took our son to Salt Lake City to do this scan on his kidneys to figure out if he needed antibiotics or if he needed surgery. And there we experienced our first miracle. His kidneys came back completely healthy. No more liquid, no more hydronephrosis, no more enlargement, just totally healthy kidneys. Then we were waiting for the geneticist. And a month later, I took another child to the doctor and I mentioned to my pediatrician, I never got a call from genetics. And she looked at me and she said, Raizy, it's the weirdest thing. The genetic department denied your referral. She said, this wasn't like insurance denying the referral. She said, this is the genetics department. And I had written that he has cerebral UTIs, hydronephrosis, developmentally delayed, low weight gain, like all these different things. She's like, it doesn't make sense. I'm going to call them up and I'm going to push them. And I said to her, no, please don't. I said, I asked the Rebbe for a bracha for clarity. And with the genetics department themselves denying my son to be seen, what better clarity could I get? And I simply said, thank you, Rebbe, for the clarity. Anyway, since then, Baruch Hashem, in the last 6 months, our Dovi has learned to sit. He learned to crawl. He learned to stand. He learned to walk. He learned to run. And now he's been slowly gaining weight. He has now made it back up onto the charts. Thank God he has never had a fever since. And he is slowly learning how to speak. So thank God, we truly saw without a doubt that the second we put up those MEZUZAHs that were missing, what a difference it made. Now, I shared the story, and the reason why Ada knows the story is because I shared it at the Chabad Rebbitzins conference this past February. And after I shared it, a woman, another shlucha, another Chabad Rebbitzin came over to me the following day. And she said to me, Raizy, I need to talk to you. And I said, what's going on? And she said, I have to tell you that I'm here at the conference and my son is in the hospital at home with my husband and he has a UTI and he has like 106 fever and he's been in the hospital since Wednesday and they don't know what to do about it. And I was supposed to, the morning of your speech, which was a Friday, she says, I was supposed to go to the Rebbe's resting place, the Ohel, that morning to daven for my son. She said, but I saw the list of speakers and I knew that this session is a really good session at the Candice, at the conference. And I just didn't want to miss the session. It's always like, it's like 7 or 8, shlucha speak short to the point, and it's a great session. She's like, I just didn't want to miss it. So she said, I came to the session and then I'm feeling like, oh my God, my son is so sick in the hospital. Am I crazy? I should really be at the OL right now davening. I should really be going to the Rebbe to daven. But I sat there listening. She says, and I heard your speech and you speaking about the crazy fevers and the kidney issues and the UTIs. And she says, I walked out after your speech and I called my husband and I said, we have to check our MEZUZAHs. And she said, not just checking our mezuzahs, but we hired the sofer to come to our house to check the mezuzah placement. And she says this was Sunday night. She was telling this to me. She said Sunday morning, the sofer came to the house and noticed that the area that the son slept was like didn't have a full doorway. And so they never had a mezuzah up over there. And the rabbi said, this room for sure needs a mezuzah. And then he checked all the rest of the mezuzahs. And after they put up that placement of the mezuzah, she said, all of a sudden by tonight, he was out of the hospital already. The entire issue had cleared up. So I wish everybody else that nobody should need to have medical issues or medical challenges to then have to fix our mezuzahs. We should, like the Mateh Ephraim brings down, that we should be diligent of checking them every year. And I know it's a hassle because taking off all the mezuzahs and putting them up is not simple, but may we have the cure before we even need the challenge.
Wow, Raizy, what a story. And it just shows the power of a mezuzah and the power of connecting to our Rebbe, because if that shlucha didn't come and sit by the conference, she would never have heard what you had to say. And that was a message straight from the Rebbe through your story, and two amazing stories in one. Beyond amazing. Thank you so much for being here. I know in your busy day, you're a shlucha. I know you said that you make hundreds of little challah rolls for your community, and that's why you weren't able to be on yesterday. And then you have on Friday other things. So I'm so thankful that we were able to fit you in. And it just shows social media goes such a long way. We don't know each other, but now we do. And I literally, all I did was put out a blurb on my social media. Anyone have Mrs. Stories? I got a lot of stories. So if your story wasn't able to be told today, don't worry, we'll be doing this again. And I was connected to you through Ada. So I'm so glad, because I know so many people will be inspired, and everyone should stay healthy and good and tap into the Temef Sayim, because it is protection for our families and our homes. So thank you, Raizy, for doing this. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for your flexibility schedule.
Thank you. And now I'm going to ask my dear friend for many years that I met through my brother and sister-in-law's Shabbos table, Candace Smith, originally from South Africa, now lives in Crown Heights, Brooklyn, to share her amazing MEZUZAH story. And when she called me, she said, "You really think it's amazing?" I said, amazing. So if you could please unmute yourself, Candace. And the story she's going to be sharing also has what to do with her mom, her lovely mom. So I hope she'll be listening to this after. I just want to say hi, because her mom is amazing. Her mom and dad, they should live healthy and well till Mashiach and with Mashiach. Candace, if you could please unmute yourself.
Hi, Chaya, thanks. So like Chaya said, I'm South African and I've been living in New York for many, many years. And the story happened a few years ago. I was still single. I had a dream that the mezuzah fell off its doorpost. And in the dream, I was inside, sorry, so I'll backtrack a bit. I was in New York at the time, and I dreamt that the mezuzah in my house in South Africa, which was parallel to my bedroom, as you come up the stairs, there's a archway, and there was a mezuzah over there, and it fell off the doorpost, and there were a whole bunch of rabbis gathered around this mezuzah, and they were all debating whether it was kosher or not. I woke up from the dream and I called my mom straight away. I said, "Ma, I just had this dream about the mezuzah. You have to check the mezuzah. You have to check the mezuzahs. Check them in my room." I told her exactly where the mezuzah had fallen off. I said, "You have to check the mezuzah." She said, "I just took the mezuzahs to be checked." I said, "Ma, you have to check them." She said, "I just took them." So this went on. I phoned her every single day. I said, "I can't shake this dream from my mind. You have to check the mezuzah." And she said, "Stop nagging me. I just had them checked." Eventually, after 2 weeks of calling her every single day, she eventually said to me, "Okay, stop nagging. I got somebody across the road who's a scribe, and he's going to come to the house. He's going to take off all the mezuzahs and he'll check the mezuzahs just to make you happy. So I said, thank you. And she called me back and she said, she checked the mezuzahs, and there was one mezuzah which was in my bedroom, going from my bedroom to the porch, which was in a very interesting position that nobody had actually seen. And this mezuzah was not kosher. And not only that, it was completely possible, but the word "shall write them in your hearts" was completely missing. So my mom had to replace the mezuzah. And that's the story, how a dream in America translated to mezuzah in my room not being kosher.
Wow, Candace. And I love how you were so persistent, because, you know, I know how it is. Sometimes I make my mom a little crazy, but you felt that your intuition was right. And it just shows that we have to trust our intuition. If something is telling, if our minds are telling us something, there's a reason for it. And I'm so glad that you shared your story today of MEZUZAH. And this is Candace's first class that she joined live, which is so amazing. This is a pre-recording that we're going to send out. And Candace told me that she loves these classes and she will start coming on more often. And that was the biggest compliment, because when my friends want to join the classes that I produce, with the help of Hashem and the Rebbe, obviously, and all those that help out, my amazing mashpia for the class, Shandy Jacobson, and all the ambassadors that share the class, and Joelle, who helps with the flyers when she can. It feels so good when your own friends think your work is important and they want to tune in. So thank you for that, Candace, for sharing that with me. And I hope it's okay I shared this with the world. But it's pretty amazing how far this class went. We're in the year of Hakel, and Hakel year is when the men, women, and children used to bring sacrifices to God. And every eighth year, we don't have a Beis HaMikdash today, but we gather together and learn together Torah, which we're doing now. And I hope you guys are getting inspired and not just keeping it for yourself, but also sharing it with your friends, your families, and your communities. I'm gonna ask now for Mrs. Henya Laine to please unmute yourself. She has a beautiful story to share with us about MEZUZAH, also a story about protection. So while we wait for her to unmute herself, I'm just gonna pull up a video of a shlucha in Australia, Mrs. Sterna Althouse, who is a shlucha in Sydney, Australia, and also a mikvah teacher. So I'm gonna pull that up now. Give me a moment.
Hi, Chaya. This story is in your merit. So 5 years ago, I was working in a Jewish organization in our local community, and the CEO was taking me around to see the new building. It was beautifully done. I noticed, however, that the mezuzahs on the door were very small. They looked really tiny, like the size of my pinky. And I thought, I wonder how recently these mezuzahs have been checked. Surprise, surprise, she said to me, they probably were checked 5 years ago. It took a lot of courage to ask this question, but finally, when she gave me the answer, I knew these look very ancient. It's not 5 years ago. So I offered to bring a sofer to come and check all the mezuzahs. The CEO agreed. She was not a religious woman, but she understood the need. And when the sofer came, he took down 23 mezuzahs. There were 30 doors in this beautiful building, but only 23 doors had mezuzahs. Well, surprise, surprise, even though I thought maybe one mezuzah or two might need a bit of extra help, all 23 mezuzahs had issues. Of the 23 mezuzahs, 19 were paper. Not only were they paper, but they had the Vad HaRabbanut's signature surrounding them, like wrapping them around. So there were paper mezuzahs in 19 mezuzah cases, and the other 3 or 4 were cloth, but in one of them, the word Uvisha Arecha was cracked in half. Now, because I was a new worker and I had offered to bring the sofa, I felt responsible that I would have to pay for the changes to these mezuzahs, which amounted to approximately 2,000 Australian dollars. It was literally the first week of my job. I didn't know what to do. I panicked. I wrote to the Rebbe and I called a few friends to help me out. I fundraised about $1,000 before Shabbos. This was on Friday. And by Monday, I had to go and give the news to the CEO. When I told her that the Rav had checked all the mezuzahs, the sofa actually, and found them puzzle, and that it's going to cost $2,000, her face changed colors. But then I said, I've already collected $1,000. And she said to me, you've collected $1,000? I will cover the other 1,000 on building and maintenance fee. I couldn't believe the mazel. I was so excited. I immediately got the mezuzahs to come from another city, and Baruch Hashem, we were able to replace them. On that very day that she committed to changing the mezuzahs in this community center, the lady who was in a coma on the bottom floor, well, she was not in the bottom floor, but she worked in the bottom floor for over 40 years. She had woken up from a coma. Her mezuzah was the one that had Uvisha Arecha cracked in half, a real cloth, but a broken word. So I wanted to shout out to everyone that if someone asks you to look at their mezuzahs, take the opportunity. If someone feels that they need to get a bracha, ask and make sure that you be the one to bring them bracha by getting the mezuzahs changed immediately.
Wow, what a story. And it just shows that, such an amazing shlucha. She took the initiative to, again, listen to her inner voice that she should say something. And sometimes it's hard to say things that are uncomfortable. But because of that, not only did she save the entire congregation, she saved this woman's life who woke up from a coma. Beyond amazing. Now I'm going to ask Henya Laine to please unmute yourself and share with us your amazing MEZUZAH story that you told me earlier today.
Hi, everybody. I'm sitting here and it's a fast day and I can't get over it. It's making the time pass by with these most incredible stories. By the way, a mezuzah is written with ink. So it's possible that the ink should be erased or it should fade away. That's why it has to be checked at least twice every 7 years. And as most of you said, we check it every Chodesh Elul, every month before Rosh Hashanah. At any rate, my story goes back 40 years. Mezuzahs, have been used by the Jewish people for thousands of years. So about 40 years ago, my then 2-year-old young girl, baby, was placed in the back seat of the car. In those days, you weren't obligated to have car seats, and there were no seat belts in the back seat of the car. At any rate, she was a very spunky young lady, as you'll hear the story. And as I'm driving, I live on Montgomery Street. I had to go down to Troy Avenue. As I turn the corner, Troy Avenue, I see in the mirror, the rear mirror of my car, that the door swung open. I'm like, oh my God, my baby is there. So I stopped the car and I jumped out of the car seat. I turned off the motor and I see the door swung open and my baby isn't there. I panicked. I ran in the middle of the street and there she was lying on the floor, the middle of Troy Avenue. I'm like, this is unbelievable. So of course I picked her up, I put her back in the back seat, told her not to touch the handle of the car. I think I moved her a little bit more to the middle of the seat. And I thought to myself, wow, listen, ladies, this is an avenue. Cars go down, and today we have a 25-mile zone. Then they could go down 40 miles an hour. Miraculous, the light was red. At the corner of Troy Avenue, the light was red. So there were no cars at that moment on the avenue. And it was wintertime, so I had bought her a little jacket with a fake fur around her hood of her face. So I don't know which way she fell. She fell on her face, on her back, on her side. At any rate, nothing happened to her. She was totally 1,000% fine. But I brought her home. I turned around, came home. I said to my husband, we're taking up all the mezuzahs, we're checking them. And as most of you did, I marked them. And I brought them to the sofa. Every mezuzah was kosher, but the mezuzah, my baby's little door, for some reason, usually they have tape on the back of the mezuzah, you tape it. But her mezuzah had a nail. And when whoever the sofer put the nail into the mezuzah door, and apparently he punctured a letter. I don't recall which letter it was, but there was a punctured letter, and that rendered the mezuzah puzzle. Of course, we immediately bought a new mezuzah. We put it on, and this daughter of mine, God bless her, has 7 beautiful children. She's a phenomenal shlucha in Florida, Rabbi Lipsker. She's a great lady, and God has blessed her. There is nothing, there's no sign to her. She's Baruch Hashem, L'Shem Siferish, a beautiful shlucha and does beautiful work. And that's the story of the miracle of the mezuzah. Hashem knew that I was going to check it right away. And so she came out perfectly whole.
Wow. Thank you, Henya, Laine, for sharing that. And I can attest to what you're saying. Your daughter is a wonderful, amazing shlucha in Bal Harbor, Florida. She's very, very loved by the community. I'm going to share a Rebbe video now, and then after we're going to have 2 shares. So give me a moment while we pull up the screen.
Rabbi Moshe Stern is Rabbi Emeritus of Sharei Tefillah Congregation in Toronto, Canada. In 1969, he served as Rabbi of Knesset Israel Congregation in Birmingham, Alabama.
My daughter, when she was very, very young, when we were already in Alabama, had moved and started as a young rabbi in Alabama, she took a Q-tip and punctured her ear. And went very quick, bum bum, you don't even realize it. And then we discovered she was losing her hearing and there was pus. We had a real problem. She had surgery 2 times, and the 2 times it failed. And I had sent word to the Rebbe that to ask for a brucha, something like the Rebbe, we're concerned. We're very concerned with the baby, with our first. And I was sitting in the house, and there were 2 shluchim that they used to go around in the summer months, a shlichus around the south. And one of them, if my memory is correct, it was Yossi Gerlitsky, I think, who's now the Rav in Tel Aviv. And I got the call from New York, from Label Groner, that the Rebbe, sends you word from that letter that you should check the mezuzah on the door of the room where the baby sleeps, and down south there's a doctor. We should investigate. There is a doctor down south that could be of great help to us. And I said to Label, I remember telling him that I have 2 shilas here. I have to ask you 2 questions. Number 1, I checked all the mezuzahs in this house about 3-4 months ago, and number 2, do I have to check all the mezuzahs or just that door where she sleeps, the room, the baby room, whatever you call it? And the labor owner said, whether you check them before or not, that's irrelevant. I mean, the Rebbe says check the mezuzah. You have to check the mezuzah. And he mentioned only where the baby sleeps. He didn't say check the whole house. Okay, and then we checked so I remember taking a screwdriver. I gave it to Yossi Galitsky. Do me a favor, snap it off the door, the mezuzah. We were sitting there at the table. There's edus to this. This is not my story. I have edus, to this story. We opened up, took the parchment out of the case, opened it up, and the word Shema was gone. In the parsha it said Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad, V'ahavta es Hashem. Everything was perfect. The word Shema was gone, and her hearing was gone. And of course, we replaced the mezuzah. It wasn't there long after we discovered, and to this day, I have no idea how the Rebbe knew there would be a doctor somewhere down south, near where we live, that will help. You just do a little research. And then, so I was conversing with somebody, my wife and I, somebody said, in Nashville, we were in Birmingham. Nashville, Tennessee is like a 3-4 hour drive from Birmingham. There's a big doctor, Dr. Shea, the Shea Clinic, ear, nose, throat specialist. He had a Nobel Prize in medical reconstruction of ear. And said, go, somebody said, Rabbi, did you ever hear about him? I said, how would I hear of him? What do I know? So we went, and Baruch Hashem, Baruch Hashem, he did it. What they couldn't do, what they were unable to do in Birmingham, that doctor did. How the Rebbe knew that doctor was there, I have no idea.
Wow, the power of our Rebbe. Unbelievable story. Hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. I am now going to ask Sarah Korn to just unmute yourself for 1 minute. I know that I asked you to add one thing and you wanted to add something as well. I'm going to unmute you. Give me 1 moment while I ask you to unmute yourself. Wait, we don't hear you. Just put your sound on. We see you. We just don't hear you yet. So I'm oh, sorry. Sarah, do we hear you now? I'm going to ask, maybe sign off and come back in, but I'm going to now ask Sterna Cassowitz to unmute yourself and share with us your other story that you wanted to share with us, please.
Okay. I was just going to mention a few other very short stories. One of them was, and I wanted to say, because of our stories, I've become very passionate about following through on MEZUZAH's checkings, being proactive with others, and also when something goes wrong, or immediately I will say, check the MEZUZAHs. And whether it's my family or extended family, friends, whatever it is. And one friend, she said her husband had this unusual cough. And she said, since Pesach, he has some unusual cough. It just doesn't stop. And I knew that I said to her, check MEZUZAHs. And she says, we went around the house and we saw that when we did newly renovations, we forgot a certain place. There was no MEZUZAH there. Immediately, they did put a MEZUZAH on and the cough miraculously left. As it had come suddenly, it left. Another, for that same person, she actually goes out back and forth into her shed and has her garden materials there and all that. And then all of a sudden, like the neighbor's tree fell from a very strong wind onto her shed. And she was having nightmares. She told me she had nightmares from just the fact that she knows she could have been there with that tree that would have definitely affected her. The shed got crushed. And she said, she told me the story. We were learning and she told me, and I said, check with the Rav if you need a MEZUZAH on that shed. And sure enough, the Rav said she does. And so they did not have a MEZUZAH there, and she put a MEZUZAH on. But the fact is, she was safe, thank God. She has been also proactive in doing. But with renovations, you sometimes forget. I do want to tell about also it's an old story, but this here has to do with Parnasa. And I heard this I saw it on the.
Could you just translate Parnasa?
Yes, I will. Everything, livelihood, not just with health, with livelihood as well. I heard this famous story. It was on the videos of the Rebbe. We see Motzei Shabbos, and it was with Rabbi Einbinder in the valley. They had a big, person in that congregation. He was a big contributor. He was doing well. All of a sudden, things started to go downhill. And they wrote into the Rebbe, and the Rebbe said, check MEZUZAHs. Maybe tefillin too, but I know for sure check MEZUZAHs. They checked all the MEZUZAHs, and things were still going downhill. and he was just not able to build himself back up. Again, they wrote into the Rebbe, and again, the Rebbe said, check mezuzahs. Again, they checked, all the rabbis, they came, they were baffled. They came, they changed, they looked, there was whatever had to be repaired, but whatever it was done. Every room, every closet, every space that needed, and it was the right placement and position, and still it did not help. Still, things were not back to the way it was, and it was just going down. And so, again, they wrote to the Rebbe, and again, the Rebbe said, check mezuzahs. And at this point, they just did not know what to do anymore. Anyway, it just so happened for some reason, they had to be, they were walking around their garden, and they chanced upon this hidden door, hidden by ivy, that had overgrown, and was covering this door, and it was hidden from sight. And I don't know who pointed it out, whether it was one of the rabbis or what. They just checked. There was absolutely no mezuzah there. And they were all like in shock. Sure, certainly they placed the mezuzah there, and things started to turn around, but it was not what I'm trying to say is that they checked and they checked and they checked. This was not a health issue. This was livelihood. So not always is it about a health issue. And here this door was so hidden, they checked over and over and got the same response, and they didn't know what to make of it. So, and I want to just say that I had someone who we had makarved and who lived in a different state I'm not going to mention, and the whole community knew about it because they were going from bad to worse. The husband was critically ill. He would be having to have surgery, and he went from one thing to another. And I heard the story, and from here, I called the shluchim there, and they were out of town, but I didn't stop. And they said, call our cousin. And I just kept calling, and just, it took a lot. The family was overwhelmed. He's being taken to ICU, he's been taken to emergency surgery, and on and on. And as much as they knew what the Rebbe said, they couldn't absorb what I was saying. Check the mezuzahs, like they couldn't handle anything else. The community was making food, everything was happening so quickly and just so crazy. The children were all there, nobody could listen to what I was saying. Anyway, again, I called the shluchim. I made sure that they coordinated with one of the children to be at the house. They did take the mezuzahs, and I've tried to ask, but I shouldn't have asked my husband to ask the shliach. I should have asked myself, but certainly they said any repairs that needed to be done, we took care of it and we hung it up. Just like so nonchalantly. But guess what? That person is better back than ever. He was dying, and he has such a miraculous recovery. I can't even explain to you. Hiking, doing all these adventurous things that healthy people do, he is able to do with no remnants. And so that was health issues we discussed, but I wanted to bring up the livelihood. I wanted to bring up having mezuzah in a car was another thing I'm pretty sure the Rebbe mentioned, but if not, it could be something I forgot. So it's good to check out. I feel just confident with tzedakah box and that, and livelihood. And there was a story that I listened to in French because I studied in France, and that's where I met your grandparents. But I want to say that I listened to the whole story in France. These people were having shalom bayis problems. They wrote to the Rebbe, and the Rebbe said, check mezuzahs. They checked. Again, it still did not just go away. It was still ongoing. And again, the Rebbe said, check the mezuzahs, and again and again. And this is the important key here. It was taken to Rabbi Pevsner, who was a big Lubavitcher of Hillel Pevsner, big Lubavitch rabbi. He is no longer with us, but in Paris. And he looked at it in the sunlight, and there was something. He called the scribe, and there is very, very strict guidelines on how it's to be made. He called the scribe, and the scribe told him it wasn't exactly the way it should be done. I think it was supposed to be done in one order, whatever it is, that no stopping in between. I'm not exactly sure the details. I couldn't research it and find out and listen to the whole thing till I got to the whole, I don't know where it is on the video online that I heard the story. But once that Rabbi Pevsner called that scribe and they discussed it, and it wasn't done exactly. So the scribe has to be reputable and has to be a Yirah Shamayim. That means he has to have awe of heaven and really be concentrating for the mitzvah to do it correctly. That's why we're so careful to get the right scribe. And of course, after that, their problems dissipated. So my point is, it's not just health, it's livelihood, it's shalom bayis, it's many things that can occur. And there are millions of stories where the Rebbe says that check tefillin and check mezuzahs, and we see miraculously how people have become healthy, how their problems have dissipated, and we should just be proactive. That's my advice. Please be proactive so we don't end up in that situation. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you, Sarah, so much. Thank you so much for sharing your stories and continue sharing your stories. I want to say thank you to Sarah Korn tonight, Sterna Cassowitz, Candace Smith, Razy Mendelson, Henya Laine, Sterna Althouse, and obviously I want to say thank you to our Rebbe, and I want to say thank you to Hashem. And this class wouldn't happen without them. So it just shows how social media really could be used for positive. I put out a blurb, who can tell me MEZUZAH stories, and I got so many in, and it's just incredible. So keep spreading light, guys, and we will see you next week.